Alright, looks like we had some brief technical difficulties, but here we are live. My name is Josh, aka Josh in the Shell. This is the Social Otaku, and I am with my co-host again, Elliot. We were gonna have a guest as well, but he was not able to make it, unfortunately. Alright, perfect. Alright, so today we will be talking about communication styles.
Hi. Real detail about this, I think on our first ever panel together where I kind of didn't know what we were talking about and we went full born into this.
Yeah, we kind of went all out with that one.
Yeah. And, well, we're doing it now, back again.
Well, and communication styles really take quite a bit of talking about. It's a pretty big topic. So, let me take a look here. I will have a graphic very shortly here. But why don't you go ahead and just give our viewers, while I'm setting that up, why don't you go ahead and give our viewers a brief overview of what communication styles are and why they're important.
Well, what we generally call communication styles, there are 4 different types that we categorize as, and you can also have subcategories, be a combination probably of 2, perhaps more if you're feeling adventurous, but usually 1 or 2. And how these interplay with each other is that do you want me to go ahead and spoil them, or do you want me to give more of a vague?
Yeah, you can spoil them, it's fine.
So without going into any details, we got kind of director or controller, thinker, feeler, and entertainer, or actor, depending on how you want to phrase those two.
Yeah, I noticed that there are a lot of different versions of the 4 types, even though they're always like the same 4 types, the names they give them are always a little different.
Depending on what site you go to.
Yeah, so the way we learned them was feeler, entertainer, thinker, and director.
Yes. And basically, a lot of people fall into one of these 4 categories, or maybe a subsection of 2 of these categories. And your best way is trying to mirror that, or trying to figure out how this person is portraying themselves as these 4 different archetypes, and how you must adjust yourself to fit into that archetype to better help yourself communicate with them as well.
Yeah, that's a pretty good explanation. It's usually a fast way to know how people are most likely to communicate. It's something you can, with some practice, you can easily pick up on. I got pretty good at telling what communication style someone was using very quickly when we were working at quote unnamed company. And there are definitely some little tips and tricks that can be very helpful that we will be going over. I just sent you, or well, not sent you, but I put in the podcast chat in the Discord.
Ooh, I see that.
Yeah, so I'm going to be marking that up on the stream as well as we talk about things. But that's just the basic image that I'm going to be putting up, and that will be going up right now. There we go.
I'm gonna spoil what I am. I am a feel-tainer, I'd probably say, and a feel-tainer. If I had to give a guess to Josh, I would think he'd be a think-tainer.
You got it exactly right.
Yeah. Because we both fall into kind of in between the entertainer, and then for him, for Josh, definitely the thinking category, and for me, definitely feeler.
So the way I view it, and I did some thinking about how to phrase this earlier on today. The way I view it is less that you're like in between, and more
Yeah.
that I mean, you really can't exactly categorize people into 4 separate groups. There are always going to be outliers in one way or another, but what's nice about these 4 is there's always one, only ever one, that's dominant.
Yes.
And so whichever one of these 4, as we go over them today, whichever one of these 4 is dominant for you, that's going to be your main communication style. But the subcategory, the second one that you put in there, for example, my dominant one is thinker. At any one time, I'm most likely to think or act or communicate like a thinker to an extent. So the way I view it is that your dominant category is just who you are naturally. That's most likely never going to change. But at any one point in time, you could be any of the 4.
Absolutely.
You could be in a situation where you're normally a feeler, but you were like, you know what, this needs to get done now, and we'll talk about the differences. But you find yourself acting more like a director in a certain situation. So your main category is just how you interact with social scenarios, how you communicate normally, or how you would naturally communicate. Your secondary is what you've learned. If you've learned to be more of a feeler, you could be, for example, a thinker feeler. You have your dominant in the thinker category, and your feeler category is just because you've learned to really kind of empathize with people. You've learned some of the traits. So for me, I'm not an entertainer thinker. I'm a thinker entertainer. I am naturally a thinker, but thanks to the stuff that we're going over in this series, I've learned to be very easily an entertainer. So I think that's probably and that little rambling, because I didn't write it down, so I couldn't adjust it or edit it. I thought through it all day, and to make sure that I could think of something that would help. But that being said, that was a very thinker way of trying to explain that.
I'd say I'm about more feeler than it definitely depends on which hat I'm putting on for the day. Because
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes whenever I'm at my job, I'm just like, oh, I've got to appeal to the kids, so I'll put on my entertainer cap
Right.
and be like, hey kids, how's it going? Blah 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 blah, and just share memes with the kids. But whenever I'm at home with my parents, I'm like, hey guys, how's it going? Oh man, sorry that sucks, Dad. Or hey Dad, how's it going? Want to watch the game, and just be in feeler mode. It definitely depends on what mood you catch me in.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. Would you say that maybe one is more dominant? Like, in general, you feel like you would use
Feeler,
one more?
probably.
Feeler? Yeah, that sounds about
Yeah,
right.
if we're in a place where I'm either uncomfortable or, I'm trying it out for the first time, I probably would put on my feeler cap first. And then whenever I get more comfortable, switch it to the entertainer cap.
All right, well, we've kind of talked about this vaguely for a little while, so let's do this. Why don't we start with feeler and start actually talking about what the communication styles actually are, because it's a good shorthand to understand yourself, but also to very quickly understand other people. And before we get into how you can use it, we really should obviously define more than just, putting up a splash screen.
Yes. I've got
So-
some words written here.
Okay,
And I bet you
perfect.
got some words written
I
here
do.
too. I think I'll go with this is from the standpoint of customer service. So, feelers are concerned and need to know everything will be all right. Agents need to use reassuring language with this group and to get solutions as quickly as possible. So basically, they're just like, "Oh man, I'm freaking out about this thing," and they're like, "Oh, don't worry, man. You know, we'll be as good as gravy." Except for maybe don't use that. Because not everyone likes gravy.
Yeah, apparently.
Apparently.
And this is something that's almost exclusively used in like call centers.
Yes.
And because of that, sometimes people kind of don't see the application of just normal social interactions, but it can definitely be very, very helpful. But yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I implore everybody who hasn't worked retail or customer service to pick these up, because they kind of get enforced, because like we're there to sell you something. It's either our help or something, and that's like drawing in the customers that way. Like, why wouldn't you want to know something about that to draw people into you?
Right.
Like, it just seems like a logic, like, oh man, of course I would have to know about these different types of people and how they interact.
And it can also kind of signify, one, that you're paying attention, because you can easily communicate with people. It can help with... I just lost my words. It can help with your own confidence, that's one thing. Because
Analysis, too.
If you feel like you now have a better way of understanding where people are coming from, then you know you're more than likely going to feel better about that situation. It's also a good way of not upsetting someone, or knowing how to deal with someone when they are upset, because the communication styles can really help you understand where they're coming from, even if you don't know exactly where they're coming from. Like, they're too emotional for you, or they're too robotic for you. You at least know why. You know their communication style, and hopefully, either by the end of this podcast, or if even maybe we have to do another one about communication styles, you'll know how to deal with specific ones. And believe it or not, as much as people like to say, oh, we're all very different, and obviously we definitely can't precisely categorize everyone into one category or another, people are still predictable. There's no getting around that. People are still going to have ways that you could easily persuade or work with them, and that's never going away.
Yeah, definitely agree with that.
One thing I would say about feelers, because I got some notes as well on them.
Go ahead.
Well, actually, let me go through. So these are what we would consider like characteristics in people who would be considered feelers. So let me actually...
Let's get back to that splash page.
Yep, going back to splash page, and I am getting my markup tool.
Oh.
Oops, no, that's...
A little glimpse behind the curtain here.
So
It's coming out on the stream, so it's looking good.
Sweet. I am... screw it.
Ooh,
draw.
triangles.
There we go, draw. Maybe now it won't decide what to do with me. Alright, so... whatever. I was hoping that would be less of a hassle anyway. But yeah, so feeler is going to be cooperative, relaxed, patient, support-oriented, friendly, and thorough. Those are just some general words that we can use to describe their characteristics. But one of the things, and we'll get into the tips and tricks later for like verbal cues and things like that, but they tend to be people who are very agreeable. Feelers are people who are sensitive to other people's either problems or emotions. They tend to be very, what's the word I'm looking for? They're very feeling oriented, and that doesn't just mean like emotions. Feelers also, believe it or not, tend to gravitate towards feeling as in like texture or smell or sensory things. So you'll notice a lot of feelers are like, they'll be more likely to use idioms like, that smells fishy, or oh wow, this feels kind of rough, as opposed to a more direct way of saying it.
Like, this is rough.
Yeah. And they tend to be a little slow at talking. You know, not that they're slow people, obviously, it's just a communication style, but they tend to be slow, they tend to be somewhat soft-spoken and things like that. So these are the kinds of people who, in every sense of the phrase, they are pretty touchy-feely.
They choose their words carefully.
Yeah. Well, I would say no, actually. I don't think...
You don't think so?
Not as a communication style. I mean, there are definitely feelers who do choose their words carefully, but that would be more along the lines of thinker, someone who thinks out what they're talking about. So let's go ahead and transfer over to thinker then. So we've gone over your dominant category. We'll go over my dominant category.
Yes.
I'll start... I guess each time I should have started last time, but I'll start with what we have on the screen first. So, thinker is systematic, logical, reserved, process-oriented, cautious, and risk-averse. So what do you have on thinkers?
That they need to understand that the process that you're going through, agents want to spend some time explaining what has happened, is happening, or will happen in the future. Basically, keep them informed. Kind of, if you want to, go into technical detail about issues. Maybe not too technical, but definitely keep them informed, and That's mainly what I took out of that.
Yeah, it's a bit, I don't know, that one's a bit weird to me. So a thinker...
It seems like written by a robot.
Yeah, like all of this seems like it was like copy and pasted from an AI trying to figure out what these things are.
Yeah.
Or it was potentially written by a thinker. Which is definitely possible.
It definitely sounds like it.
So thinkers also, just like feelers, will talk kind of slowly. A lot of times soft-spoken. So this is going to be your standard computer nerd. So, you know, the guy who talks like this, but he's always working on something. And what I think was trying to get across in that excerpt that Elliot read was that they're very methodical and very analytical. And so because of that, oftentimes they will feel more comfortable in a situation if they are explained a process. Like, it doesn't have to be, you know, like, you don't have to use all the technical jargon or tell them exactly what's happening, but make sure that there is a multiple step process so that they know and can make mental check marks, because that's what they're doing as they go along, is they're making mental notes about what's happening, what they're doing, etc. I mean, again, process oriented. That's right.
Yeah,
right
I
here.
would say it's almost like they have a checklist going on in their mind.
And they're
got to make sure it's all checked off.
Yeah, and while the feeler is not really concerned with factual information, again, this is generalizing the communication style. Obviously, there are exceptions, but in general, at least in standard conversation, the feeler is going to be more about how it makes them feel and how they feel like other people are feeling. So it gets very touchy-feely with the feeler, whereas the thinker is more about processes and facts. So if a thinker who doesn't have very much experience with using any other type of communication starts hearing about people's emotions about something, but no details whatsoever, they're going to either turn off their brain and ignore, or they'll possibly even get upset.
They're like, how does this pertain to like anything?
Yeah.
And I would be like, that's not important.
And thinkers also tend to be kind of loners. And the reason why this is one of those loner types is mostly because the thinker, and you might have noticed a trend here, by the way, and kudos if you did. If you've ever taken a Myers-Briggs test, also known as the 16 personality types,
yes,
this is these 4 were kind of a simplified version of it, because you don't need a full personality profile of someone to understand them. What you need is, just how they communicate, which instead of 16, that could easily be taken into 4, and so they actually correspond. I completely forgot to look up what they correspond to, or at least figure out for myself, but each of these boxes corresponds to one of the quadrants of the 16 personality types, the Myers-Briggs test.
Do you know what yours is?
Well, and that's the other thing, is like, it's a little difficult because I am outgoing. I actually answer some of these differently, so even though I'm introverted, they've kind of started making me extroverted in those tests. But
yes.
I am actually literally what is considered the most introverted personality type, which is INTP. If you've ever met anyone who is INTP, it is very rare, mostly because we stay indoors and don't talk to anyone. But in all seriousness, it is actually very rare to be an INTP. I didn't expect it to be that rare, and then I looked it up. Apparently it's like less than 1% of the population is INTP.
Can you guess what I am?
I would say ENTJ. Or E.
I am ENFP. Apparently, according to Myers-Briggs. I don't know how I feel about that, but apparently.
Yeah, I was about to change I was about to change the T to an F. I don't know why I chose the F. But I still would have been wrong. But yeah, so, if you know anything about the Myers-Briggs test, which honestly, as long as you, keep maybe like a screenshot of this chart or something, and then go take a Myers-Briggs, I just really don't like the stuff that we find online. Our old job had an amazing
really
resource center, an amazing way of teaching this stuff. I've made this as much as I can. I mean, most of the information we have under here is stuff I found online, but I had to change it because I couldn't stand calling it a controller. I had to call it a director. But anyway.
Yeah, I just think that Myers-Briggs goes a little too in-depth, and I'm like, I prefer the director, thinker, feeler, and entertainer. I prefer that.
Yeah, and I think potentially, like I said before, with your dominant and then your learned styles, it's definitely more useful, I think, and easier to generalize, and more actionable is probably the best way I can put that. But did you have anything else to put about the thinker?
Josh, you're a thinker.
I am a thinker.
It's about all I could add.
All right, let's move on to entertainer.
Ooh.
So, going through what we have in the chart again, entertainer is outgoing, enthusiastic, persuasive, relationship-oriented, lively, and optimistic. Now, both Elliot and I are learned entertainers. Elliot is a learned entertainer because he is a feeler, and he likes when other people feel good. And just by the way, I don't want you to interrupt because I want to say all of this and then you tell me how much was actually accurate.
Okay.
But as a feeler, he easily empathizes with other people, and he wants other people to feel good. And because he is an extrovert, that made it all the more easy for him to learn entertainer traits. And so now he is a feeler entertainer, with feeler as his dominant and entertainer as his learned. Now, how accurate does that sound to you?
Very accurate.
So, just want to tell everyone out there, we did not plan this beforehand.
No.
So, that was just me attempting to show how these can be used, and how just by understanding, just by figuring out what their dominant and learned traits are for yourself, you can tell a lot about people's history and how they got to be where they are. So you can kind of see already how useful this is. It's very simple. I mean, it takes a while to explain, and there are a bunch of tips and tricks we're going to be going through, but really it's... let me see. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. It's very simple to wrap your head around. So I'll have you go ahead with the stuff you have for entertainer, and then you'll try to analyze me as a thinker entertainer.
As the robot has written here, they want to chat and sometimes get sidetracked by the banter. Give them some small talk, then help them stay on task by referring back to the original issue. Basically, entertainers kind of like to be the center of attention. Whenever you have the dance ball, give the dance ball to them. And whenever they have that dance ball, they're going to go crazy. But remember, like, hey, you still got to work on something. So, sometimes you have to take the dance ball a little bit, but then you give it right back.
Yeah, and the entertainer is the type of person who's going to be kind of joking around. Not always. If they're not joking around, they'll tend to, tell a story. But that gets a little bit more into how to tell, and we'll get into how to tell after we've kind of described the entertainment types. They're very enthusiastic, very energetic. What else? Very strong opinions, definitely. And they can be anything from the jokester to just someone who is constantly talking. It's not like they like to hear themselves talk, although that can be the case, but they'll usually be the ones leading a conversation. Again, not always, but definitely something to look out for. So, I'm Thinker Entertainer. What do you think you can tell, knowing me and knowing the entertainment, or knowing the communication styles?
I was hoping you wouldn't pass the ball this way. Oof. Okay. Let's see. Our man Josh here, he's a thinker for sure. I know he started as an introvert, and that's kind of why he wanted to make this podcast. And the fact that he started this podcast makes me believe that he's learned the behavior of entertainer, because, of course, he wants to get out there and reach to an audience that is kind of like himself, that may have started out being a thinker introvert, and maybe having them learn this skill as well to help them adapt more into their social climate.
That's a pretty good way of putting it. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I am INTP, the most introverted of introverts. And we're gonna, I swear, the first few podcasts are going to be a lot of me saying, but that's a podcast for another time. But we're definitely at one point going to be going into what exactly is an introvert or an extrovert. But you're absolutely right. I'm the most introverted of introverts, INTP. It's just a part of who I am. And because of that, since I was not an extrovert like Elliot, I didn't have the experience, because, just as a shorthand, extroverts just tend to have more social experience. That's the only reason they tend to be more charismatic. That's the only reason, period, dot. If you're listening to this podcast and you feel like because you're an introvert, you can't be nearly as charismatic as other people. That is straight baloney.
That's just because you have
yeah.
lack of practice.
Yeah, exactly. And but we'll get more into that in the introvert versus extrovert podcast. Moving on to director, the last one. Usually the most difficult to deal with, unless you know what you're doing. Especially in like a customer service role. Like when we were working at that call center, directors were pretty tough for most people. I got pretty good at it. Elliot always had a very disarming kind of charm to him, so he could usually deal with them, although whether you can deal with them or not is irrelevant when they just make you kind of upset. But yeah, so director is decisive, efficient, intense. Oh yeah. Results-oriented, competitive, risk-tolerant. So, what does your thing say about directors or controllers, as most of the internet seems to think?
As the AI has predictive texted here, that they get to the point quickly by asking their questions or raising their issue and often explaining exactly what they want. I agree with that. And that in order to deal with them, people need to give them fast answers or frequent updates when issues can't be resolved immediately. This is also true.
Oh, yeah. So a director is someone...
Speed is the key.
Yeah, a director is someone who usually doesn't talk a lot. And when they do talk, you know, they get directly to the point. They can be very curt and very blunt a lot of the time. Like it says here, you know, results oriented. That is extremely accurate. Like, they don't go off on tangents. They don't deviate from their path very often. And they, out of anyone here, they're probably the most likely to try and control the conversation. The entertainer can just do it naturally, usually, unless they're an annoying entertainer. But, you know, assuming
Those exist.
Assuming that he's not annoying, the entertainer just has that natural charisma. But a director doesn't always have that natural charisma, and like it says here again, can be very intense and results oriented, and so it gets kind of oof.
Also, they don't suffer fools.
No, they have like zero patience.
Yeah.
So they can be very difficult to deal with if you're in retail or if you're in a call center. They can be really hard to deal with.
Can I pull a personal anecdote from this?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
There is a kid, he will remain nameless, who goes to my school, and always me being entertainer, putting my entertainer hat on, you know, be like, hey, what's up? There's always this kid who comes into the store, and he always gets something, and I try to make a joke, and every single time, he is not having it. He's just there to get his water or his snack and just to boot, scoot, and boogie the heck out of there. And he's like the 1% that does that, because most of them, they want to be a chatty Cathy. But I realized with this guy, I'm like, how's your day going? He's like, good. And I scan him. He's like, all right, see ya. I'm like, all right, bye. And that's how I've learned how to deal with that one.
Yeah, and that can be difficult if you're either a natural or learned entertainer. Because you'll want to go into the jokes, you'll want to go into stories and things like that. But just not
That's
always,
okay.
Yeah, not always gonna work for everyone.
It's just in my personal background, they seem definitely ones that I tend to get hung up or have the most trouble with, but definitely adaptable. I definitely have conversations with this guy, and eventually broke down and figured out what he liked using the tips that we learned from our first couple of podcasts.
Yeah. All right, so I'm actually looking for more photos that I might be able to bring up here. Reason being is because I'm trying to think of people you would see who really exemplify these traits. I have one for entertainer. Like, I have one popular guy who's, or at least someone that everyone should know for entertainer, but I'm just trying to think of who we can get for the other ones. But let's start at least getting into, while I'm looking for these, let's start getting into how you can tell. And this is going to be where I start really using my markup tool, because there are definitely some things that we'll be noticing, some patterns that I'm hoping people will notice. But if not, I'll be writing them down.
Yes.
So let's start with feeler. Like we said before, one way to tell almost right off the bat is if they use feely words like, oh, this doesn't feel right, or that's rough, or
I don't know how I feel about this.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about this, or they specifically go to certain emotions, or let's say, for example, again, we learned this in a call center, so let's say we're helping someone, and you ask, let's see, what kind of problem are you having with your internet? If they say something to the effect of, well, it just doesn't feel very fast. Most of the other types would either use an analogy, or they would say seem instead of feel. Seem, appear, or just isn't, which is usually going to be a director, but again, it depends on everything else. But yeah, definitely look for those keywords of feeling or sensory, like this smells like, or it feels like, or it, stuff like that. Let's see. Anything else that you can think of before I move on to the next bit about how to identify a feeler?
Yeah, if a feeler's coming in and they're like feeling not too confident, and they're like, I just don't know what's really going on, I don't know what I'm doing, or I feel like this is getting out of control or out of hand, that's usually a sign that the feeler has definitely been like catastrophizing stuff, and that's kind of easy in a customer service part because they definitely catastrophize stuff like that.
Yeah,
they feel like it's at the end of the world. But in conversation, I'm trying to think of a really good example of. Oh yeah, like whenever they're talking about their favorite movie, they'll talk about how it makes them feel.
That's a good one.
They're like, oh man, like my favorite movie's Your Name. It just makes me feel like that's one of the best stories I've heard in a while. And it made me feel a lot of emotions.
So that's definitely good, and I have something for feeler, but I'd like to just move straight over to thinker.
Absolutely, we can do that.
Because you will see where this comes in later. Because this is actually... So, unfortunately, I had to relinquish all of the files. I really, really wanted to see if I had somehow retained a version that I could at least take notes from of a keynote presentation I was making for the company we used to work for, because I didn't finish it before I quit.
Oh.
But it had some really good stuff in there, and I had worked on it for months. So, unfortunately, I don't have that, so I'm kind of trying to go off memory of what I had in there, but let's move on to thinker. Let me see. Get back to my notes. So they're gonna be very detail oriented. They're definitely going to, really be careful with what they say, and sometimes might even go through the process of what they're thinking. So they might speak a little softly or especially slowly. They'll usually tend to be the ones who just stop. The ones who just stop and then reword things to make sure that they're saying the right thing.
Yeah.
Which you've noticed I do.
You just did it. Were you doing that as a joke?
The most recent one I did as a joke.
Okay.
But I have been doing it quite a lot in these podcasts. And even though I do tend to speak fast, unlike other thinkers, and I do tend to go into stories, unlike thinkers, and I have a lot of those entertainer traits, thinker is my dominant communication style, so that's not going away. There are definitely going to be different signs for different things, but here's something. I said that they generally speak softly and especially slowly. So let me see. Slow.
Ooh, do we have a example on hand?
Oops.
Oh, we get the
No.
slowly.
I'm writing. My very bad handwriting, which is also not super great in... I'm doing this on a computer, so it's cut me some damn slack, but slow talkers, which I should probably put an S in there as well, slow talkers, thinkers, and feelers are both slow talkers. So you can literally cut this chart in half and very easily at least tell probably if they're talking slow, they're probably a thinker or a feeler. And then from there you can usually you can pretty easily tell between the two, because the thinker and the feeler are very, very different when it comes to what they say and how they say things. So if they're talking slowly, you immediately know they're probably a thinker or a feeler, because while all of them could talk fast based on their learned communication style, there's absolutely no way that you're going to have an obvious slowdown with an entertainer or a director. Someone's going to have to ask them to slow down.
Yes.
So that becomes very, very helpful. So we can just go ahead and make this right here. Oops. For crying out loud. I guess I have to do each letter all at once.
And because I'm a very inconsistent person, I do go between going fast and slow a lot of times in my speech. Like, I'll be just talking, and I'll be like, oh man, I was here playing the show, doing this, blah, 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 blah. And then I'll be like, yeah, but I don't know. Man, it just felt weird. And I'll be going like, and then I was playing the show, and I was playing the wrong notes, and blah, 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 blah. And that's like, sometimes I'll even switch hats even between whenever I'm talking, and I'm like, that's fun. Do you ever get caught in that trap?
Sorry, I wasn't listening. I got distracted by the fact that my lights went off for some reason.
Oh no!
Oh, I have one of those, God damn it. I have one of those remotes for my lights.
You mean the clapper?
No. It's literally a remote. It's got a button for the light. It's got a button for the fan. And it's been really wonky recently, but usually it accidentally turns the lights on, not off. But anyway, sorry, what had you just said? Because I like I said, I got distracted.
I was saying that being the entertainer feeler that I am, I go between slow and fast talking sometimes within the same sentence, depending on
Oh, yeah.
who I'm talking with
I mean,
and what hat I'm wearing.
haven't you noticed me doing that in these podcasts?
Oh yeah, both of us.
Yeah,
Both
yeah,
do it.
definitely. And for different reasons. We're both, and that's the thing. We're both fast talkers and slow talkers at the same time. But yeah.
People are inconsistent sometimes, and people are sometimes consistently inconsistent.
Yep. But yeah, so that's one way to look at it, and also, again, logical, process-oriented. Thinkers are going to be very much into the process of things. They might give you a list, they might give you a set of directions, and usually another thing to... You know what? I'll wait, because that's another tip and trick that we can get into in the next one. So you want to move on to... oh, no, do you have anything else for Thinker first?
All my friends that I know are thinkers. I've just noticed this. All love talking about philosophy. I don't know why.
Well, because it's... because thinkers aren't unemotional. It's just... One of the things about thinkers is that we tend to very easily get caught within our own mind, which is why we stop ourselves and talk more slowly, which is why we stop and then restart a sentence, to have it make more sense. We have a tendency to be introverted. You can't always completely tell, except with the thinker, whether they're introverted or extroverted. The other three could really go either way, although the entertainer is almost exclusively extroverted, but not all the time, myself included. But a thinker is almost exclusively introverted, and it's kind of a trait of introverts, where we kind of create our own little mindset or world, and we're very rarely bored. Because as thinker, the term thinker implies, we think about things. And so philosophy is a good way to think about things. It's a good way to process things. And it's really a way that you can understand other people without understanding other people. Because philosophy is really kind of a shorthand for how we interact with the world, how the world interacts with us. Without getting too deep into it, it's really because it's an easier way to start looking at the world, and that is something that I do want to be making podcasts on at some point with my other thinker friend, Colin.
Yes, Colin.
Because literally, if Colin and I go out drinking, 9 times out of 10, we will be standing there talking philosophy all night.
You will.
With drinks.
I've been there.
But anyway, yeah.
It's fun.
Anything else on Thinker?
No, that's... I think that explains you guys very well.
Alright, well... Let's move on to Entertainer. So, we have the first of the fast talkers, so now that we've already kind of explained the trick, as you can tell, yes, they do tend to talk rather fast. These are people who like to tell jokes, like to tell stories. You can usually tell because, and here's a little trick. Let me see if I can change the color. Should be able to change the color. Go to red. Alright, so... No. Let me just mark off Entertainer and Thinker. Oops. For crying out loud.
Oh, is there more symmetry going on?
Screw it. Screw my terrible handwriting. There we go, text box. Oops. That's too much effort. I'll just write it down here where it's easier. Details.
Ah.
So detail. Thinkers and entertainers will always give you way too much detail. Like detail you really don't want or need.
Yes.
So the main difference being entertainers will tell you too much of the story. So this let me. I told you I only had one for an entertainer, but at least they'll kind of get my my drift with this one. I gotta send it to my computer first.
This is the Social Otaku. Hopefully it is something nerdy.
Of course it is. Now I have no idea how this is gonna. There we go. All right. So, do you recognize who this is, Elliot? Has it popped up on the stream yet?
It hasn't popped up on the stream yet.
Okay.
Oh!
Classic entertainer.
Yes.
So for those of you who are traitors to your own species and have not seen Ant-Man or Ant-Man and Wasp and don't know why I'm showing this guy, Michael Pena. First of all, go watch those movies. He is an absolute gem.
He's the best part of the movies.
Oh, he absolutely is. And I love the movies, like, without a doubt, but every single time, he is the best part. And he is a classic. Actually, you know what? Screw it. I'm just gonna make it smaller. But anyway, yeah. So, an entertainer like him, like his character, which is what? Lewis? Was that his name? Louis?
Could have been. You know what? I'm gonna pull up IMDb right now.
Anyway, I'm gonna call him Lewis. So Lewis here was always, anytime he was asked about, for example, a job. So our main character, Stephen Lang, asked him about some kind of job, and here's how he starts the story. Actually, hang on.
It's Luis or Louis, probably.
Luis, yeah, I don't know.
Luis.
I'll say Luis. But anyway, Luis is like, okay, so I'm going to this art gallery with my cousin. You know, I love the modern classics, and stuff like that. And he'll just go off, and he has way too much detail, and it's really like a whole bunch of irrelevant detail, and it's a story. He's telling a story. And he's just going through way too much. That is a classic. I mean, obviously not necessarily to that extent, but that is classic entertainer stuff.
Throwing him some jokes like, they had a rosé that saved the day.
Oh, yeah. God, I love that line. Or in, like, when they gave him truth serum. They gave him truth serum, and he just wouldn't shut up. Like he is the best person to give truth serum to, because that just amplified it. Oh, that was the best. I'm sorry if that's a spoiler for anyone who hasn't seen Ant-Man and Wasp, but that was the best use of his character, because they not only took the joke, but they enhanced the joke by adding the truth serum to it, and I love it so much.
Oh, you know who I just thought of who would be a good thinker? Mark Zuckerberg.
Yeah, I'd say so. I just don't like him.
I don't like him either, but he's a thinker.
Screw the guy. Yeah.
Screw the guy, but
Let's see. Steve
And
Wozniak's also a good one,
yeah,
but I don't think he's
and,
quite as well known.
and then
Um,
feeler, I'd say Paddington Bear maybe.
mm. Can we think of actually? How about this? Can we think of anime characters? Well, let's finish up the how to tell,
Yes,
and then
entertainers.
we'll see if just as a little side project, we'll see
Can think of anime characters.
if we can think of anime characters. Couldn't
For
think of the words for some
entertainer,
reason, but yeah, entertainer.
definitely likes to talk about themselves or stuff that they did
Mm-hmm.
or like. They'll definitely bring it up to you first and then ask your opinions on what you think about it. Or they'll be like, "Oh man, I like this movie. What did you think about it?" Because they'll try and loop you in thinking like, "Oh, they're curious about me," but sometimes they're just bringing it in so they can talk about it more and why they like it. I've noticed that with some entertainers. Like I'll be like,
Yeah.
"Oh, I hated it." They're like, "Well, you didn't hate it because of the blah blah," and they'll completely ignore you.
Yep.
That's another catch to tell if it's an entertainer.
Mm-hmm. I think that's all I had for entertainer.
God, you can't surprise me with a Michael Pena like that.
Let me see. Oh, I mean, we already kind of covered everything at this point, so yeah, let's just go ahead and move on to director. Director is usually the easiest to tell right off the bat because they tend to be very curt, very short, and they get right to the point most of the time. If you're having a conversation, it's hard to tell if directors are really hard to deal with sometimes because you can't always tell if they're a director or if they're just not paying attention, like they're just not interested.
Yeah.
Because, people can be short and curt to you if they just don't want to have a conversation with you. But at the same time, they could be a director. But the best ways to tell, like an entertainer, they do talk fast, like we've already talked about. So, if they talk fast, you know that, talking fast really could be, like we said earlier, any of these guys. But it's at least a good indicator that it might be a director or entertainer. If they have very short sentences and just very direct, very succinct, and getting right to the point with almost everything they say, that's probably a director. They don't tend to be very talkative at all. Not necessarily that they're introverts, although they can be, but more that they don't usually talk with words.
Yeah.
Another one is they'll use commands instead of questions, which is a good one.
Oh,
So,
yes.
instead of again, just heading back to how we learned this. Actually, no. Let me try to not make this a customer service thing. Let me try to make this a normal conversation thing. Instead of asking, what's a good restaurant to try around here? Tell me some good
Taste of
restaurants I could
Ethiopia.
try.
Taste of Ethiopia.
Oh God, now I'm just hungry for Ethiopian. I don't have the money for it. Gosh darn it. Or the working car, but whatever. But yeah, so again, instead of asking, where can I go for good food? Tell me a good place to go for food.
Oh yeah, I didn't even know what you were doing there.
And
I see what you're doing now.
yeah, they could also make it friendlier, and that's the thing. They can be very curt and intense, but sometimes you can tell by them, even if they're being amiable, friendly. They could say, "Oh hey, tell me some good restaurants to go to." They've changed it. They've added an "oh hey," they've added some inflection, but they're still giving you a command technically. They're still telling you instead of asking you. And they're really not apt to tell stories. If you ask them what they did on the weekend, They'll probably just be like, oh, I went out drinking with friends. Whereas the entertainer will get off into a tangent. The thinker might say, oh, well, I went drinking with some friends. It was a decent night, and I didn't really do much else. Or then they might just list off the things that they did that they think you're interested in, but not go into a story, just a list. And then the feeler, again, would probably be like, oh, went out for some drinks, had a lot of fun, met some new people, things like that, things that made them feel good. Or the director, well, I went out to drink with friends, that's about it. So, very quick, very to the point. They also, kind of like the thinker, they also are somewhat fact and data oriented, like a thinker, but really not as much. I'd say it's less about the facts and data and more about results. If the facts will get them the results that they want, such as if they want the results of having food in their stomach, they, might care about the facts of who in their family, or in their household can cook. But it's not because the facts are necessarily important. Whereas if a thinker wants to get food in his belly, like me, they'll go through an entire checklist of everything that's in the house or the apartment or at least in the fridge, and then and this, usually I do this mentally, but I know some people will probably write this down, but like mentally make a checklist of everything that's in the house that's edible, and then make a checklist of different things that could be made within a certain time frame. So two completely different things. The director's gonna go more towards, okay, how do I get this done now? The thinker's gonna go towards, okay, how do I want to do this? Is this gonna be good, or should I do this? And yeah. So as much as the internet is telling me that, and honestly, this was in our training at that company as well, saying that directors are fact and data oriented like a thinker, but they're really not. It's just that it seems that way to some people, I think.
And usually, I'll be honest, directors are few and far between. I remember in the place that we were at, I think we had only 2 directors in a class of like 25.
Yeah, that's about right. And I don't remember if any of the directors actually made it from our class.
One did.
One did?
And one dropped out like the day after we figured out they were a director, I think.
Wait, who's the one who stayed?
They still work there. I don't remember.
Because I'm trying to think. I don't know. That's gonna bother me. So hopefully I'll remember by the end. But yeah, they're definitely really not that common.
But once you know, you'll know.
Yeah, it's like they're not that common, which also makes them the easiest to figure out. With some practice, you'll just be able to very easily know. But for some help, since we've gone over our little tricks, I will go over them one more time, just to reiterate, and then we'll have some fun, see if we can figure out what anime characters would be the best representation for each of these.
I've been secretly working on my list.
So feelers are usually going to be talking with sensory language or touchy-feely language. Again, they can be cooperative, relaxed. Oh, I completely forgot. I'm going to add this. As I go through, I'm just going to add some details on how to know when they're upset. Because that can also be good to know, because it can either be when they're upset or when they just don't want to be talking to you.
Yeah.
So this is going to be very important. So a feeler, as you can tell here, cooperative, a slow talker, oftentimes soft-spoken, and uses a lot of touchy-feely language like this feels, I feel, that felt, this smells, that tastes, etc. Even when it's not necessarily about taste. They'll somehow work it in there, which is always fun. But their primary stress reaction. So if they feel like they're in an awkward or a stressful situation, or they feel like they are crumbling under pressure or something like that, they will, quote, acquiesce, which is probably the most succinct way of putting that, acquiesce, but not everyone knows what that means, so let me explain. So a feeler, when they feel stressed out, they'll start doing this. Okay, sure, okay, sure.
Yeah.
All right, done. Okay, sure. They basically they conform to what the people in their social situation are doing, or seem to want them to do. They tend to be easily manipulated because anyone who knows anything about persuasion and manipulation and things like that knows that a lot of the easiest tricks to use are the ones that deal with emotions, and feelers tend to be very susceptible to that. But again, if they can feel, I have some lists right here. So,
Ooh.
famous. Hang on. What is this? Someone screwed up in this document that I'm pulling up. But I think, alright, so famous feelers would be Princess Diana, Gerald Ford, Mary Tyler Moore, and Ronald Reagan. But yeah, anyway, so that's kind of how to tell if they're not interested or if they're upset. They will tend to just kind of, they will start going on autopilot, essentially. That's probably a good way to put it. The feeler under a stressful situation will go into autopilot and just let other people kind of tell them what to do so that they can get out of the situation without having to do too much.
Or to avoid conflict.
Yes, or to avoid conflict, which is one thing they want to avoid at all costs.
Hand raised super high.
Yeah. The thinker, moving on to the thinker, again, logical, often reserved, process-oriented. Again, a slow talker, tends to use a lot of detail, like me. I keep going into tangents. Which, again, I'm really bad about going into tangents because I am both of the things that are very detail-oriented. Oh, it's bad. But yeah, so they tend to give you unnecessary detail, usually in terms of facts or parts of the process, etc. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else. We'll oftentimes stop in the middle of a sentence and restart if they think that there's a better way to put something. So those are kind of the things that you can use to tell if it's a thinker. Entertainer, once again, a fast talker, very detail-oriented, much like the thinker. But instead of giving you more facts about a situation or detailing like a list of things to do or a process or directions in general, the entertainer is going to be telling you more of a story. Again, like Michael Pena in Ant-Man. Which is a golden example because that is like the stereotypical entertainer, and I love it. Let me see. So yeah, they'll tend to be the ones telling lots of jokes and stories. They tend to be rather loud sometimes. They definitely talk fast. They'll wander from the topic. So those are kinds of the things that you're looking out for. They're probably the most energetic of everyone on this list, are the entertainers. Then finally, the director is easiest to tell. They talk fast. They talk efficiently. They don't sparse words. They just get exactly to the point. They're very results oriented. They can be pretty competitive. Let's see. Yeah, see, these examples they're giving are really not helpful in a pop culture sense. But
You want me to come up with mine?
yeah, let's go ahead and start. I think I've gone through enough of that, so let's go ahead and do the fun part and see if we can come up with some anime characters.
Okay, so for director, I thought of Lelouch v. Britannia from
Ooh.
Code Geass.
Ah, Lelouch.
Lelouch. Doesn't suffer fools.
Nope.
Will absolutely wreck somebody. And gets quick and to the point. He wants power, and he gets power.
Yep. Hang on. Let me get a picture of Lelouch.
I think that one's pretty cut and dry.
Yeah. I like this picture. Alright. Alright, so what else you got for me?
Entertainer, I chose Vash the Stampede
I'm not totally
from
familiar.
Trigun.
Wait, hang on.
He's just a...
No, keep going, because I just realized I've seen bits and pieces of Trigun.
Yeah, he's just a big goober, makes a lot of jokes, and likes donuts, and he'll cause these terrible accidents to happen. But at the same time, like, also is cracking jokes. It's like, hey, what's going on? And oh, that's a good picture.
Yeah, I like that one.
Thinker, I'm thinking either Jet or Armin from Cowboy Bebop, or Armin from Attack on Titan.
Yeah, I'll say Armin, because that's probably the one that's more readily available in people's memories.
Yeah, Armin, definitely.
Let me get a picture of Vash before we go on, but yeah.
And then for feeler, this is kind of a feeler thinker. I'd say feeler first is Deku from My Hero.
Oh yeah, definitely a feeler. I
but he
kind of
also
thought
has
of him for thinker, but
he's got both.
I think that the feeler's probably his primary. It seems like the thinker really only came in because he didn't have a quirk, and so that is his learned. So that's actually a really good. Let me see. So Vash.
Because his primary thing is always about saving people and thinking of others. So I definitely think he's a feeler, because he was one of those that didn't have power and felt like he should save everybody. But also, whenever is in a pinch and he's like, I need to think on this one, he will do it.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm having fun finding pictures for these. We'll go into detail in a second.
Well, for entertainer, what about a Spike Spiegel? Do you think that's a good one?
I don't know.
Because he's a little bit of both.
Yeah.
Of like a thinker and an entertainer.
Yeah, which go figure.
He's a complex character.
Yeah, he is a very complex character. He's also one of the people I personally look to when trying to reinvent myself.
That's why I chose Vash instead, because he's clear-cut, I think, entertaining.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of more entertainers. Cabbage guy from... I'm just...
Hey, don't Never diss the cabbage guy.
All he talks about is his freaking cabbages.
My cabbages. God, I love that. I love that anime. Yes, it's an anime.
I guess Sokka would be.
Oh yeah, well, Sokka's
he's
an entertainer thinker, but I can't tell which is first. I would honestly say he's like me, thinker first, entertainer second. A bit like Spike, but Sokka went pretty far into his I give up. For whatever reason, the photos aren't saving, so I give up. But yeah.
So for director, Lelouch, thinker, Armin, feeler, kind of Deku.
Yeah.
Then entertainer. Yeah. What are yours? Do you have any idea?
That's not gonna... Look, man, I'm just trying to remove all my markup, and I just don't remember how to do it, so I give up. Yeah, I'm just trying to think. So, I think Lelouch as director is probably about the only one I can come up with as a director. I had one. Let me just go in order. So we did director, and then entertainer. Again, I had one, but it's just not coming to mind right now. Who am I thinking of? God. I'm just gonna open up my Verve app and just look at animes and see if it jogs any memories. But I'll move on from entertainer. Thinker.
Asta from Black Clover.
Oh God, murder me! I tried rewatching it. I got up to episode 26 before I just tried to gouge my eyeballs out.
I'm hate watching it right now. It's great. I love it.
I just I can't get through it. I really want to like it. I just can't.
It's not good, in my opinion. I mean, but I love watching it.
Fair. I don't know. My brain is just not helping. How do we not think of this? L?
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right.
I mean, he's logical, he's reserved, he's very process-oriented. Thinkers can often feel very impersonal. And, L can too. So, that's one. Still trying to think of entertainer. It's kind of difficult because I've been watching a lot of abridged series lately. Maybe I'll just go with a bridge series. Entertainer in a bridge series would be Alucard from Hellsing Ultimate Abridged, definitely.
Yeah. Also, any idol anime, I bet, would be like entertainers, or Yuri on Ice. Like that's probably filled with entertainers.
I mean, not necessarily. I mean, they might be into entertainment, but if you make one with complex characters, then it's gonna be...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Just still looking through anime to see if I jog any memory. I'm just looking at a lot of anime I haven't watched, or at least haven't seen in a long time, as I'm going through this. I'll just stick to a bridge series. So if you haven't seen the abridged series I'm talking about, you should. So entertainer, Alucard, director. Director, I would say probably also from Hellsing Ultimate Abridged, Walter.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I know he's being polite because he's the butler, but when he does get into his own personal feelings about things, he does tend to get directly to the point, and while he does speak politely, he's very short, curt, and blunt. So I would say he's a good version of the director. For Thinker,
Gohan.
oh, I know, Thinker from Sword Art Online. It's a joke. He was a terrible side character who was there for like 3 minutes. And the joke is that he didn't think very much.
I like jokes like that.
Always fun. Let's see, what's another thinker I can think of? Thinking.
Goku.
Not in any medium is he a thinker. Gohan.
Yeah, Gohan.
Both in the anime and in the abridged series, Gohan, definitely.
Absolutely.
I mean, even more so in the abridged series, because they really go out of their way to be like, well, maybe if I make a makeshift raft, if I can find some wood, just fly up.
Dodge.
And it's like he overthinks everything, but he's very much going into the process and making sure, and that's something with thinkers is they tend to get uncomfortable if you're just like, hey, let's go out for drinks. They'll most likely, well, not necessarily. Usually they'll be like, okay, but where would you want to go? Before they decide whether they want to go, they have to know. Even just a small process, like not just go out for drinks, but go out for drinks at a specific bar with specific people for a specific amount of time. So that's something that, I think that definitely works. And then feeler.
Yamcha, because everybody feels for him.
I don't know. I don't know, but either way,
are hard.
either way, I think we've pretty much covered everything. We've gone definitely over time for most of our podcasts.
Oh my gosh, I didn't even know that was that late.
Yeah.
This is I told Josh before, we could either talk a little time or a lot of time about this.
Yep, turns out we talked a lot, because this has been live for almost an hour and a half. But, I mean, that last little bit was us kind of messing around, so let's just, let's go ahead and wrap it up here. These are definitely things that you could easily just have a straight-up conversation about and keep it going, so if you do have any questions about it, just go ahead and leave it in the comments below if you're watching this recorded on YouTube. Otherwise, let's go ahead and do our normal wrap-up with Elliot pulling out his list of what we could talk about, and then we'll see what we're going to talk about next time.
Do you want me to start from where the ones that I gave last week, or do you want 2 new added ones that I just added?
Well, if you've added some, let's keep going with those. I mean, just anything that we have.
I've got the importance of listening and watching others and standing up for yourself. We also have what do we like and why we like it. Networking, self-confidence versus self-worth, comedy, finding communities, body language, which we'll probably spin off body language.
Yeah, body
down.
language I think is going to be its own separate series, and I don't know if I want to do it in podcast or if I want to make edited videos about it. Possibly
and
both.
how/where to approach people. So
yeah. Let me see.
So the two new ones are importance of listening and watching others and standing up for yourself.
Right.
Should I add? I'll send you the list of topics. If you want
Yeah.
to add one, feel free.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think. Do we want to get into comedy next week, or do we want to stick with the basics of communication, like we've been, like with communication styles, self-confidence, fake it till you make it, stuff like that. Like the basics of getting out there is mostly what we've been talking about.
It's up to you. I think we should stick with basics if I'm being honest.
Yeah. Yeah, it's probably a good one. So if we're sticking to the basics, let me see. Oh, hang on. Oh, I totally forgot Discord goes into streamer mode, so it doesn't give me a notification.
Oh,
Self-confidence, how and where to approach people.
the ones with numbers by denotes which podcast we did them on.
Ah, okay. So, with why do we like what we like? Because I think that's new too. I don't think you had that one last time. What precisely do you mean by that?
Why do we talk about stuff that we like to other people? And why do other people listen to us?
Oh, okay, I gotcha. I think that's gonna end up being a very in-depth and kind of philosophical conversation. So let's hold off on that one for sure. I don't know. Standing up for yourself sounds like a good one. What do you think?
Came up with it today.
Well, I like it. I think it's something that's important and kind of a basic thing that people can be a little
I need work on it too.
issue with. Yeah. I've had some trouble with that in the past as well, because when I get angry or if I get a certain rush of certain hormones, my eyes tear up. So even if I'm not like scared or sad or whatever, it was always this like the thing that would make me anxious if I was